we've been able to hardware partition for a long time. The problem is when I hardware partition, I guarantee hardware to each part. Right? There's not really dynamic sharing. If her CPU dies, she's dead. This guy's still running fine. So we started with hardware partitioning. It's been around for quite a while. It takes about 9% of the overhead. That's not too bad from a hardware perspective. Limited resources, hard configuration. You can run multiple OSs in it because you've hardware partitioned it out. And now we started moving into things called hypervisors. Hypervisors begin to virtualize the physical hardware from the operating systems that are running on the top. Okay? So monolithic mainframes, Sean brought this up already, virtual machines. Does anybody know where VM came from? About 35 years ago, IBM developed it in the lab so that multiple people could build multiple copies of MVS simultaneously. Those that remember MVS or MVT or before that MFT, right? Multiple fixed task. Some are smiling, others are like, what the heck's he talking about? What does that have to do with Windows and Unix? You know, it's okay. It's okay. Just you weren't around when we did plugboard computing and paper tape. That's fine. You know, we like to forget those days too. But the reality is the hypervisor now allows us to virtualize that hardware layer. We were doing it with virtual machines a long time ago, guest operating systems. VMware, Xen is probably the up-and-comer biggest thing. Why? Because it's in the open source community, and it's growing leaps and bounds. VMware, great partner, provides a lot of capability with the VMware, where I can run multiple OSs on the same piece of hardware. I can fail them over. Hint, think about that and stay around, because you're going to want to learn more about how I fail things over. Really, really cool using things like VMware. 10% overhead for the hypervisor, probably worth it. I'm doing a lot of consolidation. Better hardware utilization because now I can partition and share hardware points or aggregate them. Sean talked about aggregating network connectivities. You can run multiple OSs, you got multiple boots, therefore there's multiple patches. Right? If I'm running, 15 copies of Windows on a hypervisor, that's 15 boot disks, that's 15 patches applied. Make sense? I mean, the work is still there, you're just consolidating it on the hardware. The next frame really to move to is looking into saying, okay, well, what if the hypervisor becomes a service of the operating system and everything's interconnected and you have these things called containers? Okay? And containers are really kind of cool because you end up having only one boot disk, one kernel. If I patch it once, I've patched everybody. The unique thing about containers is everybody is still segregated on services. He can't get to his data, he can't get to his services. They're all segregated within that environment. As far as they're concerned, it's like a virtual machine. Okay, it's like a virtual machine. The really cool part of it is, though, that the hardware now becomes partitioned out in a hypervisor sitting in the OS. Overhead, less than 1%, because you're sharing a lot of the same services, a lot of the same code. It's not unlike going from MFT to MVT to MVS. Those of us that remember the old days where each batch job thought he had his own operating system running behind him. Really, he didn't. Remember JES, HASP, then it went to JES, Job Entry Subsystem. Those type technologies. Okay? It's just that we're beginning to move those into the open systems world. I mean, we're beginning to realize we need those. Why? Because the off-the-shelf commodity hardware that we've been building our open systems hosts from are drastically changing. Right? I remember running on 8 megabyte mainframes. Right? I carry around a 4 gigabyte stick, USB stick. I can watch a movie on a plane and never spin up the hard drive. Right? The world that we live in from a Windows and Unix and Linux environment is changing. The hardware now is moving so fast, we've got to start thinking, okay, I can deploy 32 one-use servers, or I can deploy one server. Which one do you want to do? Not only do we want to virtualize the desktop, we want to virtualize where the user works. This gets back to thin client. I gave you the example of where Sun is and what we did, for 30,000 employees. I can take my Sun badge and go anywhere in the world to a Sun office, and when I stick my Java badge in, like a CAT card for, the DoD, my desktop shows up there. And oh, by the way, it's doubly encrypted from the Sunray back to the Sunray server, and then it's encrypted again all the way back to the storage device, so that even the guys managing the Sunray servers or the servers that I'm running on can't read any of my data. Can't read any of my data. I mean, double encryption from that. I can go anywhere in the world and stick a badge in, and there's my desktop. By the way, you can get laptops, too, that don't have hard drives that become Sunrays sitting out there.